This is Microphone Monday, in the studio with John Bailey.
Hi, welcome back to another Microphone Monday. I'm your host, John Bailey, and I'm here with Zach, the video director, right?
That's right.
Producer,
Video director and video voice actor as well.
right? And producer, I assume, and editor, and quite a few other things.
I don't edit. As far as production goes, I've done some. I've done some hiring, but I would say the bulk of my work in video games is as a voice actor, secondarily as a director, and then tertiarily as a casting director, and then just a lot as a coach. I'm sort of the video game voice acting, one of the video game voice acting class teachers, or was when I lived in LA. So
Very cool.
yeah.
So, anyways, the way this is going to work is this is not a standard interview like what I normally do. Most of them are with veteran voice actors like Michael Bell and stuff like that. So they always want to know, questions about, what's your favorite character and all these, how did you get into voice acting and, the singer, songwriter, Broadway, all that kind of stuff. Your story is probably a bit different. How did you end up being in the video game directing business?
Well, it's, I sort of, I didn't pursue it intentionally. I sort of fell into it. There are things that prepared me craft wise. And there are, some connections I made during my acting career that set me up for it. Basically, to kind of give you the saga, and I'll try to keep it as brief as possible. I grew up a card-carrying geek, comic books, video games, tabletop RPGs, big fantasy sci-fi fan. Quick ear for voices and dialects. Got my BA in theater. Did theater for a few years, and then went and got my MFA in acting. Did regional theater, did a few films, and I met a guy when I was temping for Disney Character Voices International, and we became friends, and we ended up doing a short film together. And then a few years later, after I'd finished my MFA, I moved back to Los Angeles, and I gave him a shout, want to see if he wanted to do lunch, because he was now, had his own business, producing and directing and casting voices for video games. And I thought, okay, well, this is, I want to sort of, who knows, I might be able to get a gig. And, we were friends, and it just would have been good to hang out as well. So he said, do you want to do lunch? And he said, I'm too busy, but I need somebody to do some casting and directing for me. I'm leaving town for 3 weeks, and I thought of you. Would you be interested doing this as a contractor? So I did it as a contractor for a few weeks. It worked out, and then I ended up going full time, and I left my acting career for a couple of years. Oh, and one note, when I was in grad school, I was kind of the voice and speech guy. I was a quick study with dialects. I taught the undergraduate voice and speech courses. So so I sort of had a predilection for this kind of work. A lot of classical training as well, a lot of Shakespeare and sort of text-based, and heightened text training. So I directed and cast full-time, really almost no acting at all for about 2 years. And then it was time for me to move on, and I did. And by the time I moved on, I had all the animation agents in Los Angeles in my speed dial, and I was on a first-name basis with everybody. So when I left, I contacted them and said, I'm moving on. And they said, if there's anything we can ever do for you, let us know. I said, actually, you can listen to my demo. And then I ended up represented by Sandy Schnart Talent, which is now AVO Talent. And I'm still with them, and started voice acting. And then about 9 months later, a client that I had directed for when I was with this other company contacted me about directing one of their games as a freelancer. So I started directing again. Started my own production company called Sound Dog, which I had from about 2009 to about 2011. Yeah, I've directed, I don't know, about a dozen, between about 10 and 20 games, cast somewhere between 10 and 15, and yeah, and that's kind of how it worked out.
What are some of the titles that people might recognize?
Directing or acting?
Directing.
Directing, I directed the for Relic. I directed the Company of Heroes franchise. Company of Heroes, Company of Heroes, Company of Heroes, Company of Heroes Opposing Fronts, and Company of Heroes Tales of Valor. I did not direct the sequel, Company of Heroes 2. I directed the Dawn of War 2 series of games. So that's Dawn of War 2, Dawn of War 2 Chaos Rising, and Dawn of War 2 Retribution. I directed Stalker Shadow of Chernobyl. I think I directed SpongeBob SquarePants, Creature from the Krusty Krab, a couple of Dora the Explorer games, a few Avatar: The Last Airbender games. Um, Directed a lot of voiceover for the first Saints Row. Did
Oh, cool.
the first round of casting for the second Saints Row. I directed Stormrise and directed a good bit of voiceover for Driver San Francisco as well. I think those are the biggest and most recent titles I directed.
I have to assume that being a voice actor that really helped with voice directing. I'm just gathering from, just a glance.
It sort of worked in reverse. It sort of worked in reverse because I was a voice director before I was a voice actor. I didn't really, I mean, I had done just a smattering of work behind the mic before I started directing. My foundational work before directing was a lot of theater and a little bit of film. Um,
Did your
then,
direction change after you started doing it behind the mic
how,
when you went back to directing?
sorry, how do you mean?
When you went back to directing after doing it behind the mic,
Oh, I
you know,
see. I see.
did
Yeah.
your did the directing change?
You know, I'm not going to say that it changed that much in this from my experience from leaving that company and then voice acting, for those 9 months full time, and then getting back in the director's chair. I think a better illustration or a better example of what changed my thinking as a director from voice acting happened while I was still working for that production company. I was hired by my then employer to do some voices for Saints Row, which I was doing a lot of directing for. There were just a few leftover roles, and we just needed to fill out some dialogue. So I got behind the mic, and I did a cop and a liquor store owner, and I decided to differentiate the two by giving the cop, a little bit of texture, just a little bit of texture. And it's not like a Call of Duty kind of game, but it can be pretty screamy. And I remember that I was giving advice to actors that I was directing about things they can do to protect their voices when they're using high volume. And I was recommending these bigwig voice methodologies like Kristen Linklater's and Arthur Lessack's and Kristen Fitzmaurice, or excuse me, Catherine Fitzmaurice and Patsy Rodenberg, and recommending all these books and approaches. And then I got behind the mic myself. And what I learned was that it's different.
Mm.
The techniques we use for theater to preserve our voices over the course of a run don't always serve us in getting to that gritty, very real, leaving a piece of lung on the glass kind of scream that video game directors want to hear. And if we don't
Right,
give them that sound, we get replaced,
right.
or they cast somebody else. Essentially, I had learned all these rules from my graduate training about how to use the voice in a healthy and productive way and in a safe way, and then found when I got behind the mic that a lot of that had to go out the window. And
Very cool.
and I had to deliver the product, and sometimes I had to endure pain and injury, and that was just the nature of the beast. So I felt kind of foolish, and I wanted to go back in time and rescind that advice and say, no, sorry, I get it. Your voice wasn't hurting because of poor technique. Your voice was hurting because that's the nature of the work.
Right.
So that really changed my perspective as a director.
Very cool. Okay, for those who don't know, would you be able to describe a typical video game voice actor session for us?
Okay. Um, as a voice director, I've got my scripts usually in an Excel spreadsheet format on my laptop in the control room. Um, Basically, my job is to make sure that make sure we've got the right actor, to make sure the actor is provided with all the necessary context and nothing else. So nothing unnecessary, nothing distracting, only what's necessary to the performance. So I often serve as a translator between the client and the actor, as a buffer. I will be the guy who knows actors, who knows how to talk to actors, both in a way that will them emotionally so that they can deliver their best work, um, and also to um, make sure that whatever the client gives me, I can actor speak. So when the client says, that's kind of a purple, it needs to be more of a lavender, I can get a sense of what they really, this needs to be louder and you need to pick up the pace. And
Gotcha.
right now you're pleading, it needs to be more threatening. And then the actor has had it translated into action, into words that they understand.
Right.
So that's a big part of my. Now the actor comes in. Sometimes the actor knows the role they're doing. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they have gotten the script in advance, but not usually.
Right. Been there.
And sometimes you're just flying blind, and you
Yeah,
you know
they with XCOM they only gave me even though I knew what it was for and I already signed a non-disclosure, they only gave me a portion of the script, so I still had to be told kind of what was going on because it wasn't written down.
Yeah, yeah. So the actor's job is really to honor the present moment that they're working on. So if the moment is grenade incoming, you only deal with what's relevant, which is the incoming grenade and letting your squad know. And that's it. And that's your whole job.
Right.
Your character's backstory, everything becomes irrelevant in that moment. So we're all about playing just that present moment in the simplest, most direct, and most economical terms. And then most of the time, like a lot of short lines and gameplay.
Right.
Usually maybe about 2 lines, so we have a keeper and a safety.
Right.
And then my job as a director is to select the keeper. Usually, sometimes the client selects the keeper. And that's pretty much it,
And we're talking about a script of about how long?
A script, let's say for 4 hours, and let's say the lines are maybe 10 words or less, or between like 5 words per line. I would usually schedule an actor for 400 to 450 lines of dialogue at 2 takes per line.
Right.
So that's about 800 to 9 reads in a session. Now, and that's for somebody that I trust. Somebody that's a really seasoned pro, we can risk up to about 600 lines.
Right.
Right.
Like Steve Bloom.
Steve Bloom.
Steve Bloom, Nolan
Yep.
North will come in and talk your ear off for 45 minutes into the session and still finish 50% more dialogue than anybody else.
Yeah.
Early.
Keith Ferguson is a rocket.
Yeah.
The thing that makes them a rocket isn't that they deliver the lines more quickly. It's that they give you a keeper take in the first 2 takes.
Yep.
They just get
Yep.
it. And people that are untried, people I've never worked with before, or I look them up and it seems they have very few or no game credits, I'm not likely to schedule them for more than 400 lines in a session.
I have one last thing it's kind of a 2-part question just to kind of wrap all this up.
Yes, sir.
What would you suggest for people who wanted to get into video game voice acting in general? And would you recommend it? Because I know it's one of the most difficult jobs in the voice.
So when people talk about voiceover jobs that are rough, the rough jobs are audiobooks because it's a marathon. It's a long, slow slog. ADR for some projects, especially films. I God help the poor ADR people that had to do the opening scene of Saving Private Ryan. And video games. So video games is a few hours of what can sometimes be really, really brutal screaming, or really, really rough, textured creature voices.
Throat rippers.
Yeah, throat rippers. I call them throat rippers. Yeah, that's the term. Orcs and all that sort of thing. Sort of sounds, and that can really wear you out pretty quick. So the first thing you want to consider is safety. Is this a job that you want to do? If you're a singer and you need to really well-preserved pipes, video games are not for you. You will trash your voice. Now, if you're a singer and you wouldn't mind sounding like Tom Waits, in 5 years or 10 years, then hell, go for it.
I don't know how I got these scars.
Yeah. So there's that. The next thing you want to consider is, are you willing to move to Los Angeles? because that's where the bulk of the work is. There's a little in Seattle, a little in New York, a good bit in San Francisco, but a lot of it's going to be non-union. And then most of the AAA union video game work is going to be in Los Angeles.
Just for our viewers, knowing me being remote for everything and being blessed enough that my agency sends it to me anyways.
Yeah.
Even though a lot of the times, in fact, most of the time, video games are recorded remotely, you still need to be in LA or one of the major places, and even in order to. I know that sounds ridiculous, but that's the absolute truth.
Video games are still an in-person racket. You know, unlike commercials where it's very common to do ISDN, and even some animation, you know, high-end animation like Disney and the WB, they'll be working with celebrities in New York, so ISDN becomes very common and it's factored into the budget. Video game budgets are very tight for the scale talent. For celebrities, you know, no amount is too high, you know, or it feels that way anyway to us frontline grunts, but they're not usually going to spring for ISDN, and they're often not going to trust phone patch because they can't hear the little nuances.
Right.
And a lot of people aren't going to be, a lot of directors and producers aren't going to be comfortable with that. So I find now that I no longer live in Los Angeles that my video game sessions are few and far between. But it is.
And they
still
all go to
very
the
much an
cast of
in-person
Firefly.
business. Sorry?
And they all go to the cast of Firefly.
Apparently. Well, Nathan Fillion, he seems to be, that's Nathan Fillion, right?
Yeah.
He seems to be doing a lot of geekery, animation, maybe game work as well. Just to finish answering your question as far as how to get into it, for video games, it's not a career for a voice, like a radio guy.
Right.
It's a career for an actor. It is a career for an actor. Most of the people that succeed at this were, and many continue to be, career actors in film, television, theater, and other media. So my video game career is built on a foundation of live theater, of Shakespeare, of conservatory training, of, you know, film and television work, and a lot of acting classes. This is not, for most people, there are exceptions, but for most people, this isn't the kind of thing where you take a video game class. For most people, they take a video game class to learn the nuances of this medium, but they already have a foundation as actors. So you're going to long foundation in acting 101 to some kind of voice and speech training is going to be really useful. Skill with dialects, I cannot think of a medium where dialect skill is going to be more useful to you than in video games. One World War II game, and you're going to be doing various American regional, Canadian regional, British regional, North African, Russian, Italian, Japanese, possibly Chinese. All of these dialects can be done in one genre of game.
Yeah, and it's like that for other games like Dead Island as well.
Yeah,
not just fighting it. I auditioned for it, but I noticed every time I get scripts, I notice a lot of accents in video game auditions.
Yeah, that's very common. And I worked on Dead Island, and I worked on one of the Dead Island expansions, and I was doing Australian, I did Scottish. They wanted a lot of Pacific Islanders. And yeah, and as far as dialect, you gotta only bring your A-list dialects. Right. You know, like if you do an awesome German, then do it. If you do an okay German, pass.
Yeah.
Pass and go get a coach. And I will say that dialect coaching with master teachers like the late Bob East, Liza Jane Schneider, I have made back tenfold what I spent on dialect coaching. It's been so useful.
Yeah, that's one thing that I learned is that if you can do a funny accent or a accent that's recognizable, but if you can't pass for a person from that country or that region of a country, you might as well forget it because they need you to sound. They shouldn't be able to tell the difference between you and somebody who lives there. That's how good you got to be.
The irony is that that's on the surface that's true. In reality, it's actually slightly different. And this is in my dialect coaching, which is that they will always ask for authentic casting German characters for World II sense of what sounds German from actual Germans living in Germany.
Right.
They're going to get it from film and television. And those are going to be German-American actors. So they're Germans, but who've been living in America for a while. And so they have Americans perceive as sounding. Or American actors putting on an accent.
Right.
For example, when I am German accent, basically I will do the something like this, and this accent one is very, but it is not comical. It's stereo. In addition, this is all we expect to hear from our film and our television. But it's not how the Germans that I directed for Company of Heroes Opposing Fronts in Berlin sounded. None of them.
Right.
We went to Berlin, got authentic, and then replaced 75% of what we recorded. We dumped it.
Wow.
With LA American and German American actors, because it has to do with it's not about what's real. Then we're teaching the audience an accent. It has to do with what the audience thinks the accent sounds like.
Right.
And that's what I call the cultural reference point. And you are always aiming for the casting director or the audience. That's different from true authenticity.
My advice came from an 80 said, not from me.
Okay.
So how would they go about looking to getting some coaching with you and website or all that good information?
Best way to pursue coaching with me. You know what? Basically just hit me up on email. My web presence is pretty obvious. You can always just Google my name, Zach Hanks. It's Zach with an H. And you'll find Stephen F. Austin State University in Texas now full time. So you can find my bio there, and there will be an email address where you can contact me. But you can also contact me at my personal address, ZACH at Zach Hanks, ZACHHANKS.com. And that's the easiest way to get me, or you can look me up on my university page and email me at my work address. That's fine too.
Very cool. Thank you so much, Zach. I really appreciate you being here and all the great advice you gave to all of our hopefuls. Hope you guys stay tuned and subscribe. Thank you so much, Zach. Appreciate it.
Thank you, John. Thanks for the opportunity. Good talking to you.
You too.